The CEO of the new Monsters Inc. returned to duty on Wednesday. After taking Tuesday off due to what he had to refer as family matters, the rest of the week at work went by more or less than usual, with only a couple of minor exceptions, like George Sanderson falling onto a trolley of through the cans and causing them to fly around the laugh floor and ruin a couple of doors, for instance. The new route routines that had indeed needed to settle at Monsters Inc., and the CEO had to finish some fresh routes and to his private life as well. He got up an hour earlier than normal, and then Mike would drive him over to Randall's apartment. Then Sully would use Sophie's key to lock himself in, and that he could join Randall and Miss Lorenzo for breakfast, checking if everything was alright between the two of them. Eventually he would leave for work, leaving the lizard and the old lady to themselves for the day. Sully would then go back to the lizard's apartment again in the afternoon and after work to join Randall for a dinner and maybe take him out on a walk. Before heading back home for Mike, who waited for him with supper, sometimes it all depended on the green monster's mood. Sully's days were busy, sure, but the progress of Randall was still making it all worth it. A week ago, the lizard had been avoiding all the blue monster's attempts to make contact with the bombard him with the sofa cushions once he left set foot inside his living room. However, the scaly one did talk, ate, and apparently started to warm up to the idea of Sullivan being his friend. Sure, there were still matters that Randall didn't want to talk about, his feelings for Sophie, Rex, or his past, but he could go on forever about different things that annoyed him, and Sully found out it was better than nothing. Once Friday came and the weekend approached, Sully joined Randall and Gladys for breakfast as usual, before having the odd duo to themselves and head on the floor's last week of work. He couldn't help but looking forward to the couple of days off duty now, as the week would soon be going belong to the past after a rather exhausting time. It was very cold outside, and once again the sky was clouding over. It didn't surprise Sully that if there was more snow awaiting for the citizens of Monstropolis, and just reached to Monsters Inc., and he noticed a few fragile flakes gently floating and dancing down through the clear air. He hoped the city council was prepared this time. As the furry monster entered the building and held his job, he ran into Mike, who was on his way to work, and his friends, of course, the chattered for a bit, while mostly about Mike's plans for the next date with Celia, as usual, before they headed to their separate directions to their tasks. As Sully approached his office one last time for that week, he was instantly pleased by two familiar voices behind him. "Ully! Sully, hi!" He turned around to face Sophie and Rex, who were on their way to work and daycare. As usual, Rex wanted a hug from the blue monster, and Sully made sure that he got what he asked for. Sully chuckled at the sight. That's what Sophie did. "Wow, Sully, you have gotten yourself a fan here." "It's mutual, but he's a great kid, all right, Rex?" Sully looked at Sophie, and then back at Rex, and then back at Sophie again as he spoke. Rex's face lit up. "Thanks for paying him as much attention. It means a lot to him and to me." Sophie presented the other adult with a warm smile. "After all, you're the only male figure in his life at the moment, and..." She suddenly stopped herself. Sophie didn't want to talk about the things in front of the younger son, and lowered her voice as he continued. "Can we talk about tonight, okay?" "Tonight?" For a moment Sully gazed absently at Sophie, until he slowly remembered that he accepted her invitation to join Sophie and Rex for dinner that night, and had completely forgotten about it. He had been busy with both work and Randall for the entire week. Randall. He hadn't told Randall, or Miss Lorenzo for that sake, that he couldn't come to see them tonight, as he had told the old lady that he could spend the evening with the lizard now and then. "Sully?" Sophie looked at the blue monster concerned. "Are you okay?" The CEO managed to pull himself back at the moment and gave Sophie a light-hearted laugh as he spoke. Sure, I've been looking forward to this all week." He lowered his gaze at Rex. "Especially to see your room." Rex grinned at him and took a hold of his hand. "I'm glad to hear about that. Oh dear, look at the time. We have to go now. I'm running late." Sophie excused herself. "I'll see you tonight. Then, Sully, is 7 okay?" "7 sounds good." Sophie smiled and grabbed one of Rex's hands and turned around to head for the daycare. However, she turned on the heel. "Oh, I forgot. Rex told me to meet him and your friend at the park the other day. Sounds like you guys have fun." Sully's stomach jumped, but he managed to put a smile and he hoped to look normal. Yeah, that was great." Once again, thanks for being so patient with my son and for playing with him, even when you're just his friend. Sully then smiled even wider as to cover up his feeling of growing discomfort. Luckily, Sophie didn't notice. She just returned the smile. You'll have to tell me about it tonight. Don't worry, I will. Suddenly, Sully kept his fake, goofy smile off until Sophie was out of sight, then replaced it with the reflecting stress literal inside of that moment. He had been hoping Sophie wouldn't talk to him about Tuesday, when he and Randall spent the time with Rex. Randall didn't want Sophie to know that he was back, and Sully was not a very good liar. This could get ugly. The rest of the day went by without any big happenings. Sully met Mike and the others for lunch and chatted about this as usual, and his friends had forgiven him for turning them down on the quiz night on Monday, and things went back to normal between the two individuals of the group. After lunch, Mike headed back towards the laugh floor with his best friend and started to walk back to his own office. Both of them was somewhat ready for the last half of the day. Before they went spent in their separate directions, the green monster got a hold of the blue one and pulled him aside for a moment. So, in case if I don't see you anymore today, I just want to wish you luck. You're in for a big date now then. Date? With Sophie. Mike narrowed his eye. Sometimes his friend was really slow. It's not a date. I just thought I told you I'm not into her. Well, she's into you, and she's probably even more once she learns that you're looking out for her brother. Okay, I'm not gonna tell her about that. Randall doesn't want me to. Okay, maybe not today then, but eventually she will find out about it, and then she'll be completely crazy for you. Women love men with a soft side. Just look at the way Celia looks at me. Sully was about to break in, but Mike didn't allow him to. He held up his hands and gained a little bit more serious facial expression. Sully, give this a chance, will ya? Perhaps you didn't see it, but I'm probably trying to think this girl could be good for ya. I'm your best friend, and I want you to be happy, and let's face it, I'm not going to be around forever, What, are you sick? Sully looked startled. No, silly, I'm talking about me and Celia. Yeah, one day, not far from now, she'll probably start begging to move on with me, and then you'll be all on your own, and I don't want that for ya. That's where Sophie comes in. Someone like her would be perfect to keep your company, and you'll even get a lively kid as part of the package. The blue monster just opened his mouth to protest, but Mike went on, a little more compassionate now. Look, Sul, I know it's very early to say that you're in love with her, and you're too slow to realize that you might be crushing, but give it a chance tonight, okay? Mike gave his best friend a big smile and supportive pat on the arm before Sully got the chance to answer. Then the green monster was back in the shift, humming on an old love song. Sully watched the snow fall outside as the clock approached 5, and it had been right this morning. There was definitely more snow on its way. The CEO was ready to leave the factory. He had planned to run a couple of errands before heading over to Sophie's house. He had figured out that he could probably bring her a present when he came to visit. For the last couple hours, he had tried to decide what to buy her, whatever he should bring her something for Rex as well. It was difficult, but he didn't want to buy her something that she could interpolate as a declaration of love. But what could he get a female friend who wasn't in a love interest? Everything he had thought about it so far was misunderstood, and he didn't want to buy her anything completely off either, like office supplies. Suddenly, the phone rang in his office, and Sully was happy to hear about it, as it gave him a longer break from his mind, and even had his hard time finding the phone with all the mess of his desk as usual. But he eventually found and managed to follow the sound located underneath the pile of paper. Hello, he answered when he got the phone at home, but he quickly remembered that he was hurried to add James P. Sullivan, Monsters Incorporated. Hello, Mr. Sullivan, the voice said on the other side of the line was squeaky and old. Sully didn't recognize it. Who's this? It's me. Sully was about to hang up. This was obviously someone who dialed the wrong number in an attempt to reach a different Sullivan. Either that, or someone was pulling a prank. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number. Isn't this Mr. Sullivan? Randy's sweet friend? Suddenly, Sully realized that the monster he was liking and talking to was none other than Gladys Lorenzo, Randall's neighbor and the caretaker, and just had realized that he started to worry. Gladys, is everything all right? There was a long pause. Sully's concern grew as he suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to call Randall and Gladys and tell them that he couldn't come over tonight. just to open his mouth to take a break and break the news to the old lady. But she beat him to it. Randall isn't doing so good. What? What's wrong? I don't know, to be honest. He won't tell me. He doesn't talk at all. I think you'll have to come over a little sooner tonight to see if you could talk to him. Would you mind? Sully's heart started pounding. The furry monster made a quick decision, and the only way he thought was the one to make it right at that moment. I'll be there as fast as I can. He hung up the phone and hurried over to the door, only to remember that he had to call Sophie and tell her plans for tonight would change. He ran back to his desk and grabbed the phone, and remembered that he didn't have Sophie's cell phone number, so he spent some time looking it up. He gathered his sweat back on what he did back at the office, as the always been so hot. For once he had found the number and dialed the number. Surprisingly clumsy fingers waited patiently for Randall's sister to answer. Hello? Sophie? It's Sully. Hi! Sophie's tone was happy as usual. That made it more difficult for Sully to break the news to her. Sophie, I'm really sorry, but... He then took a deep breath. I can't make it tonight. Is everything okay? Her voice touched in a worry. Sully tried her best to calm down. I'm fine. It's just my Aunt Gladys, she's sick and needs help tonight. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Is she gonna be alright? Yeah, don't you worry. It's nothing serious. She just needs some company. That's all. I'm really sorry, Sophie. Don't be. It's not your fault. Such situations aren't for us to control. Her voice was calm as ever, and Sully thought about how much he appreciated. Sophie continued. I'm fine with it, Sully. Trust me. And if you need to, you could always come over another time. Why we don't talk on Mondays, why not we come up with another day? He could actually hear her smile. That would be great. Thank you. And once again, Don't be. Fine, thanks. See you Monday, and tell Rex to say hello to me. I can't wait to see him again. I'm sure he's pretty mutual. Sophie chuckled. Take care, Sullivan, and of course, good luck with your aunt. Thanks, bye. He hung up with another quick deep breath, and then he left for the office and headed straight to Randall's apartment. Hello? Sully closed the door behind him and slowly entered the apartment to come spend this surprisingly big amount of time lately. Randall? Gladys? The old lady met him at the living room door. She seemed a little nervous. I'm glad you're here, Mr. Sullivan. What's happened? I don't know. Randy and I have had a perfectly normal day. We went grocery shopping, we cleaned out my fridge and such things, but when we got back, I started cleaning that filthy chalkboard and I haven't placed in the living room floor in days. Suddenly he got all sad and he's been on the sofa ever since. I'll talk to him. Thanks for calling. Sully smiled at the old lady and had noticed that he looked a little tired. Perhaps you want a break? I could use a nap, she said. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'll be back for the night shift. She grabbed her purse, which seemed to be resemble as a prune, and then she went across the hall to her own apartment. Sully entered the living room and looked a familiar sight of the purple lizard on the couch. The blue monster felt a chill down his spine. Randall hadn't looked this down since Sully had first seen them after he came back around a week ago. Randall, Sully sat down beside him, not knowing what else to say. He looked at each other before he moved his gaze over to the table. The things from Randall lockers at work that had been placed under a cardboard box till that day. They were all placed there. Sully looked at the different items. He didn't see how any of them could possibly upset Randall in this way. He looked at the purple monster again and noticed that he had clung something on one of his hands, a little piece of folded paper, which Sully had recognized in one of the ones that Sophie had almost unfolded that day and had given her to the box. Curiosity took him over. What's that? He asked, pointing to the piece of paper. When Randall didn't answer, the blue monster took a hold of his hand and gently removed the paper sheet. He unfolded it and realized it was a young picture. A picture of two monsters, a young adult and a small child. He saw the oldest was a younger version of Sophie, and after a moment he recognized the child, Randall, a young Randall Boggs in a purple-framed glasses similar to the ones he had been wearing during the time in college, who had been onto his sister's hand with a shy smile. So that's what you're thinking about, then, Sophie? Sully tried his best to find out the words that he couldn't know what to say anymore. And it almost just scared him to ask Randall any questions. However, he had to get him to talk, so he went on hopes that he would get a reply. Do you miss her? No answer. I understand if you miss her. She's your family, and I'm sure she misses you too. You're her brother. She loves you. Sully then remembered what Sophie had told him a week ago, that she believed Randall thought that had replaced him with Rex. She loves you, even though she has a child. Randall blinked a couple times and slowly felt even more sorry for him than before. Then he had been through so much. It was an attempt to comfort. The blue monster placed his hand on top of Randall's. However, the pity was not what the lizard wanted. He withdrew his hand and made Sully to take it down on his own. He leaned over the other way when the blue monster tried to lay his arm around him for comfort. He didn't need the other's touch besides the pride that kept allowing himself to rest on someone's shoulder, no matter how bad things got. Of course, for Randall, though, he just looked at it. He just didn't know what to do. Sully? Lee just stared at him. Randall? Sully talked to him again with his friends in struggles. He reached out and placed the other on his shoulder, only the place for Randall. His body somewhat allowed him to touch. It's okay to cry. Randall didn't answer. He just swallowed hard and avoided Sullivan's gaze. You've been through a lot. Crying is a normal way to respond. Sully still didn't want to move his gaze from the purple monster and just remained on the scaly shoulder. Just let go of it, Randall. It'll make you feel better. I promise. Then the other monster didn't respond away. Sully just thought it was probably suggest something else. Do you want to step outside for a while? Randall blinked a few more times before he finally said something. Through his voice was a whisper. Yes. A few minutes later, the two monsters were outside in the cold weather together, knowing that it was still snowing, but the sidewalks had already been cleared. None of them spoke. Randall couldn't, as his voice would probably break, and Sullivan just didn't have anything wise to say. They just walked side by side for a long time, buried in their own thoughts, not even talking or taking a look in their surroundings. After nearly a half an hour, Sully thought it was time to break the silence. If you want me to, Randall, I could tell Sophie that you're back and that you'll see her when you're ready. If you miss her, Randall stopped talking and looked at the other corner of his eye. Sully continued, Do you want me to tell her? The lizard moved his gray glaze from Sullivan and looked and nodded slowly. He wanted his sister to know. He hadn't thought about it for ages until he finally saw the picture today, and now he was unable to keep her off his mind. It frustrated him. He didn't want to miss her, but whenever he liked it or nor he had changed during the past few days, and now suddenly he did. He didn't know why or how. It just made him feel weak, and he hated it. Many things were different now, and he could feel his eyes water just thinking about it. It's okay to cry. He heard Sullivan's voice right next to him, and next reminded him of the next big change in his life. The guy had spent nearly a lifetime hating now someone who could call a friend for the last week. Sullivan had spent most of his free time with him in order to make him feel better. Randall still hadn't understood why someone would do it for him, especially Sullivan, who Randall actually tried to kill a month ago. Due to that, Randall's first thought was the blue monster come to visit had been his intention was to arrest him. And with that it turned out not to be the case. He had thought about the plan was to make fun of him, but now he couldn't. He didn't know anymore. Sullivan had been good to him, and it actually seemed that truly he cared, and Randall had a hard time trying to think of it in. Suddenly the lizard felt something running down his hot cheeks. No, not in front of someone. He just thought it was too humiliating for words. Despite giving it his best shot, Randall was completely unable to keep the tears from falling. In fact, he had tried to control them. The more they ran. At first, the blue monster didn't notice until Randall let out a loud sob. Sullivan turned his head and saw tears cover the monster's face. But once he noticed, he didn't hesitate. He reached out as fast on instinct by pulling the one closer to him and his arms around him. Sully's reaction had led into a new sob from the purple one. Nobody had, like Randall, had this dad since he was a child. When Sophie, a new sob. Sully could see and lean the body as he began to shake as well as around holding it. Randall was crying his heart out. All the blue monster could do was just stroke his back and try to calm everything down with cliches. It's okay. It'll get better. Let it out. Sully didn't know how long they would do and stay it out like that. Maybe for a minute, maybe 10. All he knew that was despite the fact that Randall was so upset. It actually felt so good. It felt so good to be useful. It felt good to be able to be comfort. It felt good to know that Randall trusted him. enough now to comfort him. And although he didn't fully understand it, it did feel good just for Randall to hold like this. It made Sully feel warm. The two monsters made it back to the scaly one's apartment around a half an hour later. The owner was doing much better, and if the crying had lightened his mind a bit, he had never meant for Sullivan to see it. But now the damage was done. He was actually fine with it. The CEO of Monsters Inc. was the only monster he could ever call his friend, and if anyone had to see him cry, Randall was glad it was him. The lizard felt safer around Sullivan now, and figured he probably wouldn't tell anyone. Miss Lorenzo was waiting for them at Randall's apartment door with a face of worried. "I didn't know where you boys were. Are you okay?" "I'm feeling better." Randall looked at the old lady as Sully unlocked and opened the door. "I just needed to clear my thoughts." "Good. I was worried about you, Randy." She followed the two male monsters into the apartment and headed straight to the kitchen. "Now do you boys want some tea?" "Thanks, but actually I should head back home," the blue one answered. "I've had a long day and Mike's probably lonely. I'll come back tomorrow." "Very well," Gladys said, disappearing into the kitchen door, leaving the two males alone in the hall. "Are you going to be fine here tonight then?" Sully looked at Randall with concern. "Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I'll come back tomorrow." The blue monster's worry couldn't let it go. "Are you sure you're feeling alright?" "I'm fine." Sully gave the lizard a smile and let one of his hands gently brush the other's arms. He wished that there was something he could do to help him, but he felt had no idea what. Sully didn't know what to do. It was just like to be this depressed. He didn't know what to do if it was that depressing. "At least I'm not alone," Randall eventually said. The statement surprised Sully. This was the first time the lizard had admitted that he needed company. "Do you want me to stay?" "No, she's okay." Randall gestured towards the kitchen where Gladys was making tea. "Fine, I'll talk to you tomorrow then, and I'll be here around noon, okay?" "Okay." Sullivan opened the door and then stepped outside back into the hallway. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Randall called out his name. "Sullivan?" "Yeah?" He lowered his gaze down to his feet. "I thank you." The words took Sully by surprise. Randall had actually thanked him for the first time ever. Despite being a little startled, the blue monster managed to send a warm smile in the direction of his newest friend in reply. "You're welcome, Randall."